Well, my name is Ted Twaalfhoven. I'm the founder of the company. I introduced other team members as well, and Dick Langeveld is going to do a product demonstration pretty soon. So at the Engage process, we started the company some 15 years ago now, especially with a mission to get operational staff much more involved in the process management, in discussing and mapping the processes, and to ultimately reach that in control situation from which you can then initiate and better manage the cost reduction programs, digital transformation, GDPR compliancy, etc. We are at the moment, we are proud to have more than 350 organizations as our customers, 60 of those in the United Kingdom at the moment, and that is growing nicely. We're very proud of that, and of course, we work very hard to support that wholeheartedly. What I like about this picture, there's only 15 customers listed here, but you will see in the white text the different reasons why they initially started using our program. And what we like about this is that there's different themes that motivated these different customers to start working more with process management and adopt our platform for that purpose. Now, what we experience with our customers is that they see an increasing number of projects. Of course, cost savings is an important one for councils, not only in the UK, also in the Netherlands. But we see a lot of projects, some of them we put under the label effectiveness, or projects that we put under the label efficiency, and even more projects that have to do with compliance, GDPR, or certifications of data security, and also transformation projects, digital transformation, but also clearly service redesign, or building more self-service for the citizens. Projects, projects, projects. And we hear from our customers that can be quite challenging to manage them. Are the goals conflicting? Is there central control? The leadership is spread out through the organization. And again, we need a new budget for that. And these projects have an impact on the work that the council is doing. And especially the last one is an important one, where the employees basically wonder, all these projects, but how does it help me? Whom do I report to? And which priority is the highest priority, and how much time can I spend on it? And maybe the most important question, are we still servicing the customer? I mean, how is the customer profiting from all of this? Right? And I'm not sure you recognize these projects. Undoubtedly, you've got other projects that you could add to the list. And then what we experience is that more and more organizations not only realize that these projects have a big impact on the primary work that the council is responsible for, but that process management helps them to turn that around. That the primary work, basically reflected in the foundation of processes, becomes a starting point for all these projects. And we made a picture for that to basically map how that could create an in-control situation based on the process foundation, in such a way that if there would be a change in the rules and regulations, that you clearly see where that impacts the processes, and from there it is linked on to where it impacts certain IT systems. Or another example, when a cost savings team is working on improving processes to make them more efficient, that you can clearly see where that impacts the service delivery, which data is impacted, and where the compliancy platform is reached as well. Basically, process management as the basis for all or many of these projects. And it has a couple of very, very big benefits. I learned about process management in factories, in aerospace, in the 80s, right? And that is basically, you don't do process management for the ultimate goal to do processes. No, you do that with the ultimate goal to become the backbone for your organizational changes. A couple of big benefits from that. First of all, is that all these different projects have a better chance to being up to date when changes happen. With that, it would be terrible if you have a new GDPR register, and if that register is outdated because somebody made a process more efficient. Through process management platform, they can stay linked. The second benefit is that the details of the processes become better known. And that is important both bottom up and top down. And with bottom up, we mean that if you are responsible for the cost cutting project or you're responsible for the compliancy, it is essential that you know about exceptions in processes. Unawareness is your biggest risk when you're responsible for one of these projects. And the other way around as well, and we call it top down, the employees in the organizations, they have to know when they're working on an exception of an exception of an exception, that is basically a citizen that must be treated differently. They must know if there are different risks or different systems that they have to deal with. A third big benefit is that you can run impact reports out of the environment, an impact report that takes all these different projects into account. Also, you'll see a synergy between these different projects, and once you have your process database up and running, you'll find that all these projects will be faster and cheaper because that foundation only has had to be set up once. Next, the organization will keep its focus on primary services. Right? People are not lost in doing projects only. No, they can see these projects in the perspective of their work. Last and not least, you will be able to reach people-driven change from their involvement and their involvement from their primary work, involvement in all these different projects. Now, then, for doing that, people have been discussing processes already for typically since the 70s, when Toyota and Motorola started with all of that. And maybe much longer, already 200, 300 years ago, people were working on processes. But we've all learned to do that with Post-it notes and brown paper sessions, and you're probably familiar for that. And yes, these sessions are very good to get the engagement of the team, but you only go in a very limited depth of discussion. So for that purpose, people then retype these Post-it notes to Visio or another tool in squares and triangles. And the problem with that is that these squares and triangles is only a single view of the process and very difficult for people to understand that, right? And if you or I have made such an overview in Visio and then somebody tells you that a process step must be added, well, that is very difficult. It is very difficult to have an interactive discussion. At many organizations, the quality manuals are then created from these process maps or from text, right? But in all fairness, probably in your organization, people read these quality manuals, but we know a lot of organizations where these quality manuals are not really being read. And we'd like to emphasize that the importance of process management is not to create documentation, but the importance of process management to have the discussion and exploration of the processes. And for that purpose, it is important to also know what is the process, to what depth do you need to look into that process. And the hidden factory, that is a term that's being used in the lean philosophy. And basically it states that if I would take a page out of the quality manual and ask that specific employee to what percentage of the incoming calls are done exactly in line with the instructions, then often the answer is, well, that's only 80%. But he or she will also say, you know, it's only 80%, but don't worry. I've been working here a lot of time. I know how to deal with these other requests as well. And studies show, right, in human-centric organizations that these instructions are only correct for 60 to 90% of individual tasks. That itself is not a problem, but if we then would look at the process, and if this is a simple process with only 6 steps, and if every step of the process is only done to the book, the letters of the book for 80% of the time, that would mean that of the average incoming requests coming in, only they follow the book for 26% of the time. In other words, the sum of the exceptions is often much greater than the number in the happy flow. And basically this tells us that if we want to be in control of our processes, we must focus on the exceptions as well. And that is the problem with a lot of traditional process management tools that we saw in the beginning of the century, that they only map the processes, they only reflect the processes high over. And so we have set out to make a tool that allows you to go to the relevant exceptions of the processes as well. A nice example was sent to us by the city of Stichtse Vecht. Well, that's a Dutch city. I'm not going to ask you to pronounce that correctly. But the city of Stichtse Vecht, they did a process workshop and realized in their process that there were 3 exceptions. And then they started using the Engage Process platform and basically explored the same process with the team. And they realized that that simple 3rd process is definitely much more complicated and basically is key to getting this process in control, is understanding the exceptions within that 3rd exception of this process. The detail of the exceptions is incredibly important. And you'll here also see that this team used a function in our tooling to score the activities, whether they were truly value added. They made them green, to make them red if they're absolutely not value added anymore. Those were probably tasks that were needed in the past. And the yellow activities are activities that are internally value added. Yeah. So we have designed our platform for people empowerment and people involvement. First of all, it is made for workshop, and clearly, if you do a process workshop, you would love the people to be in the same room. But we have seen also during the terrible COVID times that it works very well as well when people are working remote. It is a single screen only, and when people are remote, and Dick Langeveld is going to show you this tool in a minute. Instead of squares and triangles, we use intuitive icons, so people can read the process as if it is a comic book without needing training for that purpose. The process mapping, the process design is done automatically, so you can instantly do it, instantly make changes. And there's a tables function behind it where you can basically make categories of data that are relevant for the processes. For example, the roles or the IT systems or the sensitive personal data or risks or control measures, etc. And all of that detail, you can link that to the process steps, show it if needed, but only if and when needed. So we call that show hide. All that data is always hidden, so you have this clear process overview. And you can create a swim lane, an alternative view on the process map for each of the table elements. And Dick is going to show you that in a minute. And you can run calculations. Now that is very important when you want to reduce the lead time or reduce the cost of a process. You can make a change to the process, push the button, and instantly see what the impact of that change is, also in complex processes. You can then map also process steps, whether it is value added or not. And we have a findings module that when in your discussion of processes, you define actions that need to be taken, you can immediately push these findings, these actions, to our team board. That is a Scrum board that is included in Engage Process. So you can basically define actions and immediately assign those actions to people, give them a deadline, etc. You also immediately, instantly create a handbook, a quality handbook, in the same logic of the workshop tool. You have the same detail in the handbook. You can look at the processes at different angles. You have hyperlinks there to documents or systems that need to be used, etc. And in that handbook, there's a feedback module. When people are back in that workstation and they have a new idea, they can immediately share that new idea with all the people that are involved in the discussion. And we have a strong reports function. We listed here, for example, GDPR. A lot of people are making their GDPR register or a risk management overview in Excel. Our platform, you create a report, a register like that within a minute from that same database. So all the processes that were changed in the past couple of days, all those changes are included in this new report. Our platform is a cloud SaaS up and running. We host it Microsoft Azure Europe, and our customers are up and running within a day. This is the complete platform. Dick is going to show that to you in a minute. We have 3 main modules, and we have some 8 supporting modules. Yeah. Now, with that platform, we help our customers to set up the platform. We do only a limited amount of consulting. We only do product consulting. And our product consulting, within 1 day or 2 days, we help you to set up that platform to your specific goals and targets. And from that moment on, you can address these different themes from that same platform. And these are, of course, just examples. Yeah, you have a single platform and you address different themes from that single platform. Any questions? Any remarks at this moment before we go into the demo?
Meantime, I'll share my screen with you guys. Let's see. There we go. So, obviously, we love to show our products to you as well.
I don't see it there.
Oh, hold on. I can change it around because I've shared my own screen now, but I'll hold on.
Internally to our big screen. Dick was hiding it from me. Yes.
Hold on. Now my screen's gone all funny. Bear with me just a little bit. So, I'll share the main screen we were looking at, and I'll drag and drop. There we go. So, if all is well, then you now can see the, first you have a login screen, and then you get this oversight of the different modules that's been talking about. And I briefly wanted to show you the modeler and bits of the viewer as well, right? So you make, create, analyze processes, and at some specific point in time, you start sharing these processes together with the rest of the organization so that they can learn and start working in line with each other. We're a SaaS software, so through your browser you get to log on to the system. So you would typically need an internet connection and a browser to have access. If you press F11, then you're not bothered by that browser anymore, but you'll see our application full screen. Now we've made the modeler, and I'm aware that for some of you this is all very redundant, because I'm happy to say that more than half of the people in this session are users of Engage already, but obviously in the breakout session after, we'd like to discuss the application of our product in a little detail. And if you ask questions, I'm just going to run through all the different aspects of the product as well. Sorry to everybody that already knows, but oh, there you go. So we've made it look a little bit like an Office application. The reasoning behind that is, well, everybody typically would know how to navigate our product then as well. So no further explanation needed. There's tabs. Each tab has a ribbon. Each ribbon has all the functionality you might need. Big. There are a lot of room for the process. So the actual diagram, so mapping the process, looking at the process from all different angles is done on a big screen. And around that, you can open and close and save tabs so that you always have the right information in front of you, depending on the role or what you want to communicate. Now on the left, you see nothing, but once I've opened the project, you see the content of that project, and that stores all the processes that you want to communicate. But very importantly, also shows you the tables, all that centrally stored information that you want to then link to each individual process step. So it makes sense, obviously, to beforehand think about which kind of roles do you actually have within the organization, and then name them so that everybody uses the same role names and not anybody working with processes gets to abbreviate or think of their own roles.
Oh, Dick.
Sure.
I now see the questions. I apologize for that. I've not seen the questions before. Would the customer get all the modules that you mentioned as part of the license?
Yes, is basically the answer. There's one or two functionalities that are only there for our enterprise solution, single sign on a dashboard functionality and approval, but those are not shown in the demo anyway. They're open to be discussed obviously in the breakout session, but they're not part of the demo. So everything you'll see now is available for everybody in that's using our product.
Okay.
Yeah. So tables, very important to centrally make lists of all the bits of information you want to then attach to your processes. This typically is a big part of the implementation that we do right at the start when hey, you start using Engage. Then you open a new process to start mapping a process. So I first want to show you what the dynamics of that is. How can I actually start mapping a process and what does that look like? Well, to begin with, we'll show you icons instead of triangles and other shapes. And the reasoning behind this is when I show somebody a telephone, it's quite probable that I don't have to explain to them what's asked. It's something with a telephone. Above it, I'll put the role, the person that needs to do this, and below the action, so what actually needs to happen here. And by doing this, everybody's immediately aware of what's going on and can quite easily read a process. Now, these icons are, well, each company can for themselves decide which icons they want to use. So this can be built by each organization bespoke. So your own applications are visualized and your own icons are used so that everybody using the product can sort of get a feel for or see the organization reflected in the process. Now let's say just for an example that this process starts because an applicant calls. Here you'll find a drop-down menu of all the roles we've listed before, and the call center employee, that's the role that picks up the phone generally. Now, typically, we would also ask at this time, how long does a typical call cost you? And what's the processing time? And somebody might say, well, listen, that's 5 minutes. But for a first round of questions, that's typically enough. Who does what? How long does it take you? But you see here, there's a lot more information you can add. All the different tables you might think of can be added to a process step. You can do after you've mapped the process at least, do an exercise around value added that typically or briefly touched on that. But it's nice to score each process step according to value added. So the question might be, does the customer understand why we do this? And if the answer is yes, then typically it's a customer value added process step, green mark on that. Customer might not know why we do this, but we do need to do this. Then it's a company value added process step. Okay, we need to do this. It's a yellow sticker on it. But if it's not A and it's not B, why did we do that? So it's a good way to score all the waste, lean term, you've gathered along the way. So if you then click on the value added function, you can immediately see what the status of your process is in a very visually attractive way. You can link documents. And when it's a link by URL, so you can link to a central location where, for example, the work instruction is stored and maintained, or a checklist is stored and maintained. The in and output can be mentioned, right? What information goes in, what information goes out. There's a larger property field still that houses ROSCI or RACI, just how you'd like to call that. That can be altered as well. And then a third way of entering, but also a nice way to visualize how much data could actually go into a process. We have a property editor where you can step by step add all these lovely little bits and pieces of information that you want to then want to report on later hand. But it can all be stored in one process step even, but you always can also communicate the process very clearly. So just flick on the information you want to show, but leave out the information that isn't relevant at that point in time. So somebody calls, we look up applicant. That's perhaps done by the same rule. I'll speed up here a little bit. And afterwards we might have a meeting on all the applications that come in, etc., etc. Now, what I want to show you here is that we draw processes automatically, and especially, obviously, when you want to learn from each other, perhaps share processes amongst each other, it is quite important that everybody maps processes in a similar way. Well, that's not a concern. You don't have to teach anybody about the conventions around process mapping. It's all done automatically by us, and it's always done logically and correctly. So that's a big load off, I'd say. Well, to illustrate, typically when you discuss a process somewhere along the line, somebody would say, well, listen, they don't just call, but there's other ways about it. There's other ways they reach us. And everybody that's ever mapped a process knows that if something changes at the beginning of your process, that's sort of annoying, because then you'd have to redo a lot of the work you've done already in making it look nice and clear up all mistakes that pop up. So to illustrate, the sort of applicant varies because, well, telephone we discussed, but we also have a web form available, and we also have front desk logins. You can then add a frequency, how much do they call, how much do they use the web form, so that later on you can do a full analysis on the process. And you can then quite easily, let me make a little room here, enter the rest of the information. So web forms are taken up automatically and then flow into the process again. And the front desk, well, there's one or two process steps there, and then they'll flow in as well. And if you think, well, listen, we want this meeting there, or you know what, this call might be useful. No, that's a bad mistake. That's a mistake. We'll have the call there. It's drag and drop, and just as easy as you can have the discussion on a process, you can map the process while you're having that discussion. And obviously, this is a lot of detail, and that detail might make sense a lot of the time, but not always, typically. So it makes sense to be able to create sub-process, the so-called drill down. So let's say this is our intake phase. And it's nice to know it's there. And when I want to have a further look at it, I can fold it out and have a look at it in detail. But for now, this is perhaps enough detail. And after intake, we might have a delivery phase. Of this phase, I'm not really sure how it goes exactly, but I do know which risks we are mitigating here and which applications we use. So by way of placeholder and containing some information already, I can place it here as well. And another important one, that's our process link. Invoicing, for instance, invoicing is always done in the same way, no matter where it's kicked off. So in this, I'd just like to call our link. Hold on, I do. Need to go here. I just like to link to the invoicing process that is kept and stored and then maintained somewhere else, but now and forever into the future, it's referenced here as well. So I can open it here, have a look at it when I need it, but I can close it once when I don't. But I don't have to be mindful of maintaining it.
You did it very quick. Open it and close it.
Oh, if you press a plus,
yeah,
you'll open it within the actual diagram, the actual process you're showing. If you double click, it'll open in a separate tab, so you can discuss it separately. Good reminder. And that is more or less what we wanted to show you on mapping processes and the dynamics of the tool around that. I've prepared a process that has a little more information in, so that we can show you what you can actually do with the process once, well, it's mapped and it has a lot of information in. Because it's not just about mapping processes, but then obviously it becomes about communicating a lot of information and analyzing the process as well. So what we see here is a sort of similar process as we've mapped, only a bit larger, right? Something comes in, is looked up, is booked, is reviewed, etc., etc. Well, yeah, you see per process step, there's different short descriptions popping up, the essence of this task. Well, you can write that in the description. Perhaps there's been remarks or issues noted along the way which we need to tackle. You see short little or tiny little miniature icons popping up whenever, for example, there's a document attached. So through these links, you can go to the work instructions, for example. A little bit of odd duck here is the pause button, break button, or the break time. We have a start, we have a pause, and at the end we have a stop. This indicates that there's a break time, which is quite relevant if you want to make processes more efficient. So typically you would ask after the processing time, how long does it take you? But if you also ask how often do you do that, then these will appear. If somebody says, well, listen, I'm a planning expert, I'm not full-time employment, but I work around Tuesdays, I work around Thursdays, and I pick this up twice a week. Then, well, a break time of a day and a half will appear, and those add up really, really quickly. So you probably want to discuss those. And if you want to discuss those, we figured may as well visualize them so you can discuss them and communicate them together with the team. Now, this process continues. Choices being made, checks being made, and then this process ends. This is quite a linear way of showing a process, the value stream, a chronological order in which this process is.
Another question comes in from James Gray. New users of the platform, how have they approached existing process mapping?
Oh, good one. Typically, they're imported, depending on how they've been mapped before, but we've made sure to include well, the most common standards, the most common of which is BPMN, which is sort of the industry standard around mapping processes. But there's other ones in there as well. So typically through that, existing processes or previously mapped processes are imported. Be mindful, though, that a process mapped 3 years ago, review it at least before you import it, because then next to the process diagram, all the process information is imported as well, and it might create more chaos in your environment than it'll do good. I hope I've showed you anyway the ease with which you can map a process. So typically just taking up the processes that are there still, or reviewing them while you're remapping them in our tool, that doesn't take a lot of time either.
Yeah, we typically also see to that question that customers always, and maybe one of our current customers in this session would like to answer that question as well. But we see a lot as well that customers put on the wall a printed layout of the old process, and then use the Engage process for a process brainstorm. And maybe you want to show later on the knowledge center where the white paper is for the tips and tricks for process workshop. And they use a workshop to get a new version of the same process. And a workshop like that, like Dick demonstrates here, it only takes a couple of hours to get a new as-is situation.
Yeah. I hope that answers the question, and please do interrupt whenever something pops up. So as I said, chronological order, value stream. This is the process, and it's quite easy, but it's a common way in which processes are mapped, because you won't miss a step and everybody will understand. However, it's typically not the easiest way to look at a process from different angles, right? Me as a call center employee, I do these 3 tasks, but do I do other tasks as well? Or from an application perspective, which applications are used, and where do they sit, or which control measures do we have in place and where do they sit, right? So swim lanes, as if you would look from above on a swimming pool, you have these different swim lanes, and you can contribute properties to each lane. So what happens is along the way, you'll add more and more information to each process step from tables. So roles and applications and well, anything you can think of. And because you did that, we'll give you a swim lane to match. So with the press of a button, you can now see this process from role to role and how the handover points, where the handover points sit. Or from application to, oh, that's the wrong one. From application to application. So how does this process flow to, from application to application? Where's the in and output in these applications? Well, et cetera, et cetera. Where do we have risk? So the reason for this is that you can now quite easily show this process to a lot of different stakeholders and have them look at the process from their own perspective, but obviously in the context of how the work is carried out. Now, another cool thing was the value added. I've shown you before, right? So now we've scored per process step value added or not, and now can see what have we, where have we placed our red sticker. So what do we collectively think can be removed? Obviously, there's typically a lot of break time that nobody finds useful. So we might want to discuss that amongst each other. And if we've had a discussion already, notes might have been made. So let's talk about the notes we've made previously, but don't show those notes when you want to discuss something else. So click that away again. And the same goes for all these filters that are built in. You show what you want to show, but you leave out what you don't want to show at that point in time. Now, another nice feature, if per process step you've asked how long does this take you? How often do you do this? And you can link a hourly cost to each role. You can then analyze your process. You can say, well, I'd like to see now how long is the lead time, how long is the processing time, and what are the accumulated costs whenever we do this process. Now, I hope you can read this, but the top one is lead time is 28 days and almost an hour. The processing time, however, is only 3 hours. And the cost per time that we do is £372. So, okay. Right, that's nice information to have. What stands out, obviously, is we have this in-house for 28 days, during which people can call and complain and ask questions. But we only spend 3 hours on this. So big difference, maybe. Perhaps it's useful to then look at where the bottlenecks are in this process. So what you can do is you can set well, threshold settings, a bit of a slide ruler, where you can say, well, I'd like a red flag, a red dot above the top 25% of added, well, take your pick, but we're discussing lead time as an example now, but you can do costs as well. And then you'll see that here, the 1st and the 15th of each month, we're reviewing citizen feedback twice a month. Okay, perhaps that's debatable, right? But at least here we can book a lot of book the greatest difference when we start addressing this added lead time. So yet another way to bring some focus to the discussion when you're having it. And then if you want to change the process a little bit off the back of this information, or perhaps in a general sense, what you would typically do is you'd copy paste, Control-C, Control-V, the process you have now. So you've mapped the way you're working now. Perhaps you'll call that a current state. And from that, now we'd like to address a future state. How can we work tomorrow? So what have we learned and what can we change? And well, keeping to this discussion, perhaps we find that, well, we review citizen feedback, but for the most part, there is no citizen feedback. So having learned that in this discussion, perhaps we'd like to feedback, question mark. Yes, every now and again, I'll look like this. Yes, for let's say 5% of the instances, but no, for 95%. So if there's no feedback, it doesn't have to wait to be reviewed, so it can immediately flow to the next step. Well, looking at break time or circumventing break time, another one might be the planning expert reviews applications. That's done bi-weekly because, as I said, he works bi-weekly. But you know what? We may want to make this a group activity or a group responsibility. The call center employee can do this themselves. So we can change the role. We can remove the break time then, because the flow will be, well, we book it in and we review the application at the same time. It's just small examples of improvements you'll typically find when you look at a process in a structured manner. The point then becomes, well, we've changed some stuff around. I think intuitively we know that this is probably going to result in a shorter lead time, but perhaps not, or how much is this all worthwhile? So how can we evidence the change that we've envisioned for ourselves? Well, through the analysis function, you can also compare. You compare your current state with your future state to get a very strong indication on what the influence of these efforts will be. And here we find that the lead time is shortened by 30% if we do this tomorrow. And that's obviously an incredibly handy figure to have, because you can have evidence, you can build a business case off the back of this, but also if somebody makes a suggestion, you can in a live environment test that suggestion. And how nice is it that you can say now, well, listen, look at, if you start doing that tomorrow, we'll save, not only will be 30% faster, which will result in a lot less calls, and we'll have a lot more overview of the work we have at hand, but straight off, we reduce costs by 13%. So a lot of positive feedback hopefully will come from the visualizing and making concrete that what the impact of change may be. Now, let's say that everybody's on board with this proposed change. Then obviously we'd like to let other people know what's going on as well. So on the collaboration, we have a shared function. And through this shared function, we're going to communicate this new version of our process. So let's say we're going to share. We're going to select with whom we're going to share. We're going to typically give some information on what has changed in this last version of the thing we're sharing, so that people don't have to guess at it, but there's just a short list of the most recent changes in your process. And now we've brought it from the modeler to the viewer, so the read-only environment where the rest of the organization will pick up all the processes and then learn about the tasks in them. Then you can obviously tell to the organization, or say to the organization, well, listen, that's where we store all our processes. Go and have a look. But obviously you want to have as many people look at processes as you possibly can. So making it easy to have a look helps a great deal. And to do that, typically it's useful to create links. So a hyperlink through which people can, by the press of a button, navigate directly to the process you want to share, or the process handbook in a more general sense that you want to share. So let's just imagine somebody will press that button and that will bring them to our viewer app, the viewer environment, so the handbook environments of your organization. And the way that handbook environment looks is up to you, or is up to you together with the consultant helping you with the implementation, because typically we'll create this handbook with you when you acquire Engage process and start implementing it. So an example might be, this is an example of a housing environment, where just a clean environment where everybody can navigate to the process that they want to have a look at. For a local council, we have, for example, a one-pager where through the use of icons and little subscripts, people can quite easily see which process they want to navigate to. And just to keep it with the same example, I'll go to the example we've just shared, because it's not just that you have to look at this process in a linear way, but you can still show this in any swim lane you might want, so that people can then quite easily navigate this process as well and say, well, listen, I'm the permit advisor, so this is apparently what I need to be doing. And within this process step, there's a description there, or I'll take an example with a little more documentation. And if you double press, you'll fill up the entire screen with that one specific process step and have all the information you might ever need to in order to execute that process step. And if you come across something that doesn't seem right, you can add a comment. Wrong document is linked. Now this obviously is nice because this is linked immediately to the process owner. Process owner gets a mail, and that mail is a link. That link brings into the system, and that's where the comment is saying, listen, you need to do something about the document here. But also other employees looking at this will immediately know, oh, I know that there's a document here, but apparently there's something wrong with it. So I might want to inquire after what's wrong with that straight after that comment is made. That, in a nutshell, is what the viewer does. So a very clever way to navigate through the process you want that you might have a question on, and then show that process in a way that makes most sense to the audience.
Then could you also show, or I'm not sure yet planned, for a very short of the tables and the reports function, that maybe there's also IT people participating, that they can see.
I was going to do reports. I was going to skip tables actually, but I will now. It's an administrative function, right? The lists I talked about, creating those lists is managed in tables. Now how that looks is as follows, or how that works. You've got different table types which you can think of on your own, and there's obviously, as part of the implementation, a lot of help from us on that as well. Let's take one of the simpler ones, roles. So the table type is role. You can then create different versions, perhaps per team or per organizational part. You can have different tables there, and then you work out those. So work out the different role names you want to use within your organization. Now, the nice thing, and that's why I think that address this, is that you can then add properties to each individual table type. So you can say, well, not only do I want to list all the roles, but I want to have linked to that an hourly rate. And it's nice in itself, but obviously from a risk perspective, you might want to have more than just one property linked to any risk. So you might say, well, if this risk is mentioned, I obviously want this little checklist, this little document linked, but also the risk profile. I want to have that linked to this specific risk that is mentioned as well. So from an administrative point, you can take care of all that information. And once it's used within your process, so once a risk is mentioned, all that information will be linked to this process step immediately. And that's what I showed earlier, but perhaps in quite an empty environment. Let me just briefly get rid of this. In that process step can then be, oh, doesn't pop up. There we go. A lot of different information. And that can be either linked directly, but also obviously from that those links you made within tables. And on a process level, you might want to look at it individually, but obviously after a while you've met a lot of different processes, and then you can unlock all that information using reports. So what you can do is cross-reference all that information you've gotten from tables and link them together. So let's say where applications are used, we've mentioned the application being used, and for each process step we've noted the role involved. Now with the press of a button you can see a cross-reference table. I'll switch it around though, of all the roles and all the applications throughout all the processes within the organization. So if an advisor leaves or comes on board, these are the applications that he's working in. Now building on that, you can make them a little more interesting, a little more complicated maybe. Now, this one is broken for some reason, but let's say we're creating a GDPR report where we need to know, let's see where it is. Where are we using personally identifiable data? So in which process, but even more so in which process step are we using this personal identifiable data? In which application are we storing this? What's the, where does it sit? Lawful justification. Why are we using this personal data? Which role is involved? How long do we need to store this? When have we checked on this last? Etc., etc. And that makes up your GDPR report. You can save this, store it better than we've done just now, but the ease with which you can create this is I think is apparent. And now every time you press your GDPR report, a current GDPR report pops up, not the one we've done last year, but the one of, created from all the processes and the status of those processes now. You can then export this and fiddle around with it and make the turntables and do lovely reports on it. But all that information is current. So that's nice. I think that's what you were aiming for, report-wise, that and tables-wise, correct?
Yep.
Perfect. And that basically concludes what I wanted to show you on creating processes, enriching processes, analyzing processes, and changing them around to see what the impact of the change is, and then obviously share that with the rest of the organization. Now, if there's more organizations, and we're servicing over 370 councils, I think even more in Holland and the UK at the moment, and a bit of Flanders. And for each of those regions, we're building a knowledge center, and we're gonna for the Scottish region as well. And obviously, everybody mapping processes in a similar manner will help with that. But what this knowledge center covers is not only manuals and instruction videos on each part of the application and how to use it and configurations. I mean, we've been set up a year ago, but I now want to build on that. So how can I do that? But we're also building a example library where, well, depending on the topics and depending on what you want to achieve, we'll organize everybody's input on that centrally so that everybody can download each other's examples and upload them into their own system and start working from those. So that's our knowledge center. Obviously, this is not just something that we have, but this is something we need to build together with our users. And that is what I wanted to show you.